September 6, 1976, 1:50 p.m. Over the gray waters of the Sea of Japan. The sky is deceptively calm. High above the scattered cloud layer, a lone interceptor cuts through the thin air at nearly the speed of sound. The aircraft is massive, long, angular, built for one purpose: speed and altitude. Its twin engines leave faint shock diamonds in the cold sky. Inside the cockpit sits Senior Lieutenant Viktor Ivanovich Belenko, a Soviet Air Defense Forces pilot. And in just a few minutes, he is going to betray the Soviet Union. The MiG-25 Foxbat was one of the most feared aircraft of the Cold War. To the West, it was a mystery wrapped in titanium and secrecy. NATO analysts believed it could outfly and outfight almost anything in the American arsenal. It was the Soviet Union's crown jewel interceptor, fast enough to chase spy planes, high enough to threaten strategic bombers. And right now, one of them is flying straight toward Japan. Belenko's gloved hand rests lightly on the throttle of his MiG-25P. The cockpit vibrates with raw engine power. Below him stretches the endless blue of the Sea of Japan. Behind him, back in the Soviet Far East, radar operators still believe he is on a routine training mission. They are wrong, very wrong. Belenko had not always planned to become the most famous defector of the Cold War. Born in 1947 in the Soviet Union, he grew up like many boys of his generation, raised on stories of heroic pilots and patriotic sacrifice. He joined the Soviet Air Defense Forces with pride. Flying was everything to him. But over time, the shine wore off. Life inside the Soviet military was not the glorious machine propaganda promised. Equipment shortages, poor living conditions, constant political surveillance, and above all, a growing sense that the West was not the monstrous enemy he had been taught to fear. By 1976, the idea had taken root in his mind: escape. But escaping the Soviet Union was nearly impossible. Borders were sealed, surveillance was constant. Even pilots, trusted as they were, flew under tight control. Any deviation from flight plans triggered immediate alarm. Unless you moved very fast. On this September afternoon, Belenko is flying what appears to be a routine training sortie from Chugaevka Air Base in the Soviet Far East. But inside his flight suit pocket is something far more dangerous than any weapon: a plan. The MiG-25 roars forward at low altitude, skimming beneath Soviet radar coverage. This is the most dangerous phase of the escape. One mistake, one early detection, and Soviet interceptors will be on him within minutes. His fuel is limited, his navigation is tense, and his destination, Japan, is still hundreds of kilometers away. Inside the cockpit, warning lights flicker softly. The Foxbat was never designed for comfort. It was built to climb fast, strike hard, and land. But today, it is being used for something its designers never imagined: defection. Belenko checks his instruments again. Fuel tight, altitude low, heading south. Every second matters. If Soviet ground controllers realize what he is doing, they will scramble fighters. And unlike the West, the Soviet Union had no hesitation about shooting down one of its own pilots if they suspected treason. Belenko knows this. He also knows there is no turning back. Below the aircraft, the Sea of Japan stretches endlessly, cold and indifferent. The horizon ahead is faint, but somewhere beyond it lies Hakodate Airport in northern Japan. If he can reach it, if he has enough fuel, if Japanese air defenses don't mistake him for an attacker. Too many ifs. The Foxbat surges forward. Mach 0.9, Mach 1.9.
The aircraft begins to drink fuel at an alarming rate. The MiG-25 was notoriously thirsty, especially at speed. Belenko is walking a razor's edge between speed and survival. Behind him, Soviet radar operators begin to notice something strange. The blip on the screen is not following its assigned route. Back in the Soviet command post, confusion spreads. Controllers call his call sign. No response. They call again. Still nothing. Now the alarms begin to rise. In the cockpit, Belenko hears none of it. His radio is deliberately silent. His eyes remain locked forward, scanning the haze for the first glimpse of Japan. Sweat forms under his helmet despite the cool cockpit air, because now the clock is ticking. Then, suddenly, a new problem. Fuel is dropping faster than expected, much faster. The MiG-25 was designed for short, high-speed intercept missions, not long-distance escapes across open water. Belenko does the math in his head. It's going to be close, very close. Ahead, through the haze, land begins to appear, Japan. But reaching Japanese airspace is only half the battle. Landing a Soviet super-interceptor at a civilian airport with almost no fuel left might be the most dangerous part of the entire mission. Behind him, the Soviet Union is now fully alert, and fighters are beginning to scramble. Belenko pushes the throttle forward. There is no turning back now. Not anymore.
The coastline of Japan grows sharper through the cockpit glass. Senior Lieutenant Viktor Belenko leans forward slightly in his seat, eyes scanning the instruments, then the horizon, then back again. The MiG-25 is still fast, too fast, and the fuel gauge is now dropping with frightening speed. He does the math again. Not enough. Not for mistakes. Not for a missed approach. Not for a second chance. Below him, Japanese fishing boats dot the gray water, completely unaware that one of the Soviet Union's most secret aircraft is screaming overhead. Inside the cockpit, warning tones begin to chirp. Fuel low. The Foxbat was never meant to loiter. Its massive Tomansky engines were designed to gulp fuel in exchange for blistering speed. Now that design choice is coming back to haunt him. Belenko pulls the throttle back slightly. Every kilogram of fuel matters. But slowing down brings a new danger. If he loses too much speed, if he climbs too high, Soviet radar might reacquire him. And if they do, interceptors will follow. Behind him, back over Soviet territory, confusion has turned into alarm. Ground controllers are now certain. Belenko has deviated. Badly. Phones ring across the command network. Orders are issued. Fighters begin scrambling from nearby bases. But the MiG-25 is already far ahead and still moving. Inside the cockpit, Belenko switches frequencies, preparing for the most delicate moment of the mission. He must enter Japanese airspace without getting shot down. Japan's air defense network is already reacting. Radar operators are tracking a fast, unidentified aircraft approaching from the north. The speed profile is unusual, the altitude inconsistent, the flight path erratic. To Japanese defenders, it looks suspiciously like a potential threat. Interceptors are placed on alert. Surface-to-air missile units stand by. The situation is seconds away from turning catastrophic. Belenko spots the coastline clearly now. Hokkaido. He's made it. But the most dangerous phase is just beginning. He begins his descent toward Hakodate Airport, one of the few runways within reach of his remaining fuel. But there's a problem, a big one. Hakodate is a civilian airport, and the MiG-25 is coming in hot. Air traffic controllers in Hakodate stare in disbelief at the radar screen. An unidentified supersonic aircraft is descending rapidly toward their airspace. No flight plan, no clearance, no warning. Panic begins to ripple through the control tower. Inside the cockpit, warning lights are now flashing steadily. Fuel critical. Belenko lowers the landing gear early to create drag, bleeding off precious speed. The aircraft shudders slightly as the gear locks into place. He is committed now. There will be no go-around. The runway finally comes into view. Civilian aircraft are still parked. Ground vehicles are moving. No one is ready for what's about to happen. Belenko lines up the approach manually. The MiG-25 was never known for gentle landings. It was a high-speed interceptor with the landing characteristics of a missile. And he is coming in heavy and fast. The fuel warning turns urgent. He is seconds from flameout. The Foxbat crosses the runway threshold at dangerously high speed. Too fast, way too fast. Belenko slams the aircraft down onto the runway. The tires shriek on impact. Rubber burns. The aircraft bounces once hard before settling, but there is still too much speed. He hits the brakes hard. The drag chute deploys behind the aircraft, snapping open violently. For a moment, it looks like it might not be enough. The MiG-25 barrels down the runway, screaming past stunned airport workers and frozen ground crews. Then, slowly, painfully, the massive interceptor begins to decelerate. Finally, it rolls to a stop. Engines whining, fuel nearly gone, cockpit silent. For a long moment, Viktor Belenko just sits there, breathing heavily inside the helmet. He made it. He actually made it. Then he opens the canopy, and the Cold War will never be the same.
The canopy rises slowly into the cool afternoon air. For a brief second, there is only silence. Senior Lieutenant Viktor Belenko unstraps himself with steady hands, though his heart is still pounding from the landing. The engines of the MiG-25 wind down behind him, heat shimmering off the aircraft's massive fuselage. On the ground below, chaos is building. Japanese airport workers are frozen in place, staring at the enormous gray interceptor sitting where no Soviet aircraft has ever sat before, on a civilian runway in Japan. Some of them think it's an emergency landing. Others aren't so sure, because the red star on the tail leaves little doubt where it came from. Belenko climbs down the ladder carefully. He knows the next few minutes are just as critical as the flight itself. If the situation is misunderstood, if someone panics, this could still end badly. He removes his helmet, raises his hands slightly, and in heavily accented English, he delivers the sentence that will echo through intelligence agencies around the world. I request political asylum. Within minutes, Japanese police and military personnel surround the aircraft at a cautious distance. No one approaches too quickly. No one quite knows what they're dealing with. Because sitting on the runway behind Belenko is one of the most secret aircraft in the Soviet arsenal. Word spreads fast, faster than anyone expected. By evening, both Washington and Moscow know exactly what has happened, and both sides understand the stakes immediately. For the United States, this is an intelligence goldmine. For the Soviet Union, it is a nightmare. Within hours, American intelligence officials begin urgent coordination with the Japanese government. Requests are made, carefully but firmly, to allow technical examination of the aircraft. Tokyo agrees, quietly, very quietly, because the opportunity is too valuable to ignore. In the following days, the MiG-25 is carefully dismantled and transported under tight security to a hangar where American and Japanese engineers can finally answer the question that had haunted NATO for years. What is the Foxbat really capable of? What they discover shocks everyone.
Western analysts had feared the MiG-25 was a super-maneuverable dogfighter capable of dominating American fighters. It wasn't, not even close. The Foxbat was brutally fast, brutally powerful, but it was also crude in many ways. Heavy steel construction instead of exotic titanium, limited maneuverability, avionics that prioritized raw interception over dogfighting finesse. In short, it was a high-speed interceptor, not the air superiority monster the West had feared. This single defection reshaped years of NATO planning almost overnight. Programs that had been rushed forward in panic are reevaluated. Intelligence gaps that once seemed impossible to close suddenly vanished. All because one pilot decided he had had enough. Back in the Soviet Union, the reaction is furious. Embarrassment at the highest levels, security reviews, interrogations, and sweeping changes to procedures for Soviet pilots, because the unthinkable had happened. One of their own had flown their secrets straight into Western hands. As for Viktor Belenko, his journey was far from over. After extensive debriefings, he was granted asylum in the United States. He would eventually become an American citizen, living out the rest of his life far from the rigid system he had risked everything to escape. But the decision he made on that September afternoon in 1976 would echo for decades. One aircraft, one pilot, one calculated risk across the Sea of Japan, and the balance of Cold War aviation intelligence shifted forever.